Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. We'll continue reading from Imam Al-Ghazali's Juz of the Qur'an, Jawahir al-Qur'an. We have reached Surah Al-Ankabut. Imam Al-Ghazali chose 9 verses. They begin with verse number 19. Have they not seen how God originates creation? And then repeats it. That indeed is easy for God. Have they not seen how God originates creation? And then repeats it. أولم يروا كيف يبدئ الله الخلق ثم يعيده إن ذلك على الله يسير. But before going into more details here, Surah Al-Ankabut has 69 verses, and it begins with the al-ahruf al-muqatta'a, these letters that could be found at some chapters of the Qur'an, and the scholars differed about what could be the meaning of these letters. Typically, not without, and obviously Surah Al-Ankabut is an example. Typically, with these letters like Alif Lam Mim, Alif Lam Ra. So typically, with these, after these letters, you will find that the book is mentioned, meaning the Quran, of course. That's the norm in the Quran. But you'll find that we don't have this here in this particular surah. Rather than mentioning the book, so for example, in Surah Al-Baqarah, Alif Lam Mim Dal Kitabu La Rayba Fihi. Okay, so this is an example. ذلك الكتاب, the book, لا ريب فيه. After mentioning these first, the identical Alif Lam Mim, and I think there are 6 surahs that begin with Alif Lam Mim. And the beginning of the surah, do people think once they say we believe that they will be left without being put to the test? You say that you believe. حسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون. And we know that there will be tests, inevitably. There will be tests once or twice a year, major tests. But the test is really ongoing. As long as you live, one will be in real life. Of course, there are tests. There are tests in the political realm, oppression coming from your own, people who have the same background like you, or foreigners who would still a colonial project, for example. But there will be a test. There will be a test with, of course, in the world of politics, this is not the end of it, but that was one example. In the world of economics today, the test is whether you would succumb to the capitalist model that exists today. In what did the capitalist model that exists, the capitalist paradigm, if you will, it has been unjust to a great segment of the society, but it's not about how much you make. And this, of course, there will be opportunities, but the major problem is that it is riba. When it is riba based, then it's going to remain problematic. And in the social order, when you talk about more than 100 genders today, that's a test. When today, the moment you say a family is a married husband and wife, male and female. That's not fashionable anymore, and not many people would dare saying that. Some conservative Christians in the United States would say they would say something like the ideal situation is that you'll have father and mother, male and female, the ideal situation, while saying that the other alternative family structures do exist and should be accepted. They would say, and this test basically also took place in people who came before us were also tested, and these tests, these tribulations, they show who is really the truthful or those who are liars. The notion of وَمَنْ جَاهَدَ فَإِنَّمَا يُجَاهِدُ لِنَفْسِهِ, towards the end of the, of course, the very last verse probably, there's different rendering, though. There's فَمَنْ جَاهَدَ فَإِنَّمَا يُجَاهِدُ لِنَفْسِهِ. It's a Venn diagram. قتال and jihad, you need to have a Venn diagram where the common area in between is common to both, to qital and jihad, which means that there is qital which is not jihad, and there is jihad which is not qital. It's not fighting. And Imam Al-Ghazali, just to give an example, mentions a story about one companion who said that he who thinks that seeking knowledge, being a student, is not a form of jihad, then there's something lacking in his brain, in his intellect. And this is it's not really dismissing the other forms. It is simply we're giving an example of where jihad is not fighting in this particular case. But those who believe and do good deeds, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised to absolve them of their sins. In Surah Al-Furqan, which we have mentioned before, in Surah Al-Furqan, even when people commit grave sins, such as homicide and adultery, still if they believe, if they repent, if they do good deeds, all these three things, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will wipe out they will change really their sins into good deeds. And there is a verse about honoring the parents. So if you think about the relationship with the other religions, it's going to be like a Venn diagram. In the common area between both, honoring parent, I believe, it's just like it's universal. Honoring parents is a must. And part of this honoring is that one would obey them unless they ask him here to do something that contradicts that is really forbidden in Islam, especially if it's really a call to go back to your old ways of being an unbeliever, really, to associate anyone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, something that you have no clue what is, then you don't obey them. And those who believe and do good deeds, they will be admitted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the company of the righteous. لَدْخِلَنَّهُمْ فِي الصَّالِحِينَ. And the first prophet to be mentioned in this surah, in this chapter, is Nuh alayhi salam. And how long did he stay amongst his people, calling them to the universal message of Islam? Talk about that message through and through. Don't talk about the message that In particular, it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, but originally all of them should have simply called their people, respective people, أن ادعوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره. So here it says that how long فلبث فيهم ألف سنة إلا 50 عاما. And let me give you the a translation that you might find on online. Indeed, we sent Noah to his people, and he remained among them for 1,000 years, less 50. That's how it ends here. إلا 50 عاما. But this is the first part of that I'm going to comment on. No, it's not really 1,000 years less 50. Here in Arabic it says 1,000 years, ألف سنة, less 50, but not years. Sana, solar year, and Am is a lunar year. So we don't want to mix apples and oranges. So what will be if you calculate what will be the outcome? Almost all people say 950, but that's not true. To be more accurate, less 50 lunar years, it means that there's a year and a half difference. So the number will be, rather than 950, it's going to be 951 years and a half. So you have that one year and a half. That's really an understanding, at least. So فأخذهم الطوفان. This story of the flood, there aren't many details here, except that Nuh alayhi salam did build a ship in the middle of nowhere, away from the seas and oceans and rivers, and people mocked him because of this. But when it was time, and it's not mentioned here in Surah Al-Ankabut, in the Qur'an, when it was time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam to have a pair of every animal and to put them on the ship, on the ark. Now, I would like to utilize the opportunity, since we have mentioned the flood, at-Tufan, and there are those who say that the author of the Qur'an took this story from the Bible, and the author of the Bible took this from the Epic of Gilgamesh, because there is a story of flood in that epic, the oldest known epic in human history. So the assumption here is that one leads to the other, and that there is no revelation. Well, it's very simple. The flood did take place, and when Revelation mentions the flood, then this is really the accurate account of what took place. But those who survived the flood, I'm 100% sure with the Azza wa Jal that those who survived the flood they spoke about it, and hence you talk about a popular narrative ending up in a story like the Epic of Gilgamesh. As it seems always the case, there's a difference between the stories of in the Quran and the stories in the Old Testament, as an example. Not even one without details, and when we have differences, the upper hand is for the Quranic story, because the stories of the Quran are preserved. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam and the people with him on the ship, except that, remember that his son, who resorted to a high mountain, thinking that the mountain would save him on that day, and Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam knew that on that day nothing will save those who were outside the ark. All the believers simply, if you really So there's a difference. That son drowned, and it was a sad scene. You can almost hear the tone, the emotions. When Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam, in a different context, asked his son, "Ya bunayya irkab ma'ana," "O son, ride with us, hop into the ship." And by that time, the springs of water were gushing water, and the skies were literally pouring rain. And but that son would still think that resorting to the material causes would be the ultimate answer to this particular flood. Well, that was his end, and the Qur'an mentions that the waves came in between, so Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam at least did not see his son drowning. Then the narrative shifts to Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. He asks his communities, people, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be God conscientious. And that would have been the best choice for for people to do. And Ibrahim alayhi salam, being the iconoclast, he mocked their idols, and he reprimanded his people for worshiping these idols and for making these idols at the same time. When he knocked down, when he damaged, when he destroyed all the idols surrounding the Kaaba except for one, when he amongst his own people, not around the Kaaba, that was Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Ur, Iraq. If this is of course, this is the biblical narrative, one way or the other. So he mocked the idols, he knocked down, he destroyed all the idols except the largest one. So when his people came back from their celebration, day of celebration, away from their town, or they knew that it was Ibrahim alayhi salam. And when they asked him about who did it, and he pointed to the largest of these idols, and they knew immediately, because they logically these idols would never be able to do anything. They were simply stone or whatever the material that it was made from. Now we are now approaching verse 19. أولم يروا كيف يبدئ الله الخلق ثم يعيده إن ذلك على الله يسير قل سيروا في الأرض فانظروا كيف بدأ الخلق ثم الله ينشئ النشأة الآخرة إن الله على كل شيء قدير. In both verses, and we did mention earlier in previous sessions that the creation, being Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the creator as a theme, has been mentioned in the overwhelming majority of the chapters that Imam Al-Ghazali chose here. أولم يروا كيف يبدئ الله الخلق ثم يعيده. In Surah Al-Qasas, وربك يخلق ما يشاء ويختار. In Surah Al-Naml, أمن خلق السماوات والأرض. Then obviously that this theme has been repeated because it shows that it's very important. And how does God subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates, and we are invited to look at the beginning of creation. If it's the human being, obviously inshallah the case, because يبدأ الخلق. The whole creation has a beginning, and here it's subhanallah, since it does mention the second that it's bringing people into being once again. He originated the creation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah will bring it into being one more time. One more time. Inshallah, I'm just going to say something. The human genome has a little bit more than 3 billion letters. And the overwhelming majority, 99.6, are common, and 0.4% accounts to differences. The RNA probably, it means simply one thing: your blueprint is preserved. Your blueprint is preserved. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates, He initiates, He begins, He originates the creation, and the next verse, in verse 20, وَالسِّيرُ فِي الْأَرْضِ, travel throughout the land and see how He originated the creation. فَانظُرُوا كَيْفَ بَدَأَ الْخَلْقَ ثُمَّ اللَّهُ يَنشُرُ النَّشْأَةَ الْآخِرَةَ. Let's see how He originated the creation, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring it into being one more time. Surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most capable of everything. The next, because with Sayyidina Ibrahim salam, it makes sense to mention Sayyidina Mustafa salam, his story. He believed in Sayyidina Mustafa salam. He believed in Sayyidina Ibrahim salam, and he did mention that he will immigrate in obedience to my Lord. إني مهاجر إلى ربي إنه العزيز الحكيم. إني مهاجر, I'm going to immigrate. And we know that in different contexts of the Qur'an, وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ, meaning Ibrahim alayhi salam, وَلُوطًا الْأَرْضِ الَّتِي بَارَكْنَا فِيهَا الْعَالَمِينَ. So they were saved to this land. This land, Palestine, is rich with these stories. And remember Sodom and Gomorrah, but they have been saved. They have been brought to this land, Ibrahim alayhi salam and Lut alayhi salam. And to the people of Sayyidina Lut alayhi salam performed something that they were the first in human history to perform, which is really sodomy. And remember when Lut alayhi salam rebuked the men of his people, the male, this is exactly what it is: you certainly commit a shameful deed that no man has ever done before you. So we're the first. Had it been had it been innate and not something that people develop on their own, then it should have been practiced by people before them. So the first people who practiced this were the people of Sayyidina Lut salam, and it's a very clear account here about what's the nature of this statement. Or it does say here in the next verse, do you really lust after other men, abuse the travelers, and practice immorality openly in your gatherings? His people's only response was to say mockingly, "Bring Allah's punishment upon us, if what you say is true. إنكم لتأتون الرجال وتقطعون السبيل وتأتون في ناديكم المنكر فما كان جواب قومه إلا أن قالوا ائتنا بعذاب الله إن كنت من الصادقين." The surah mentions that the punishment that the angels, of course, who brought the general punishment to the people of Lut, except for Lut's alayhi salam family, minus his wife. Why his wife? Most probably, Wallahu alam, she approved what her people did, and it did take place, the general punishment. So these are simply, we are almost halfway through these verses, trying to understand what's going on in Surah Al-Ankabut. I would, you have Ad, and you have Thamud, and you have Qarun, and Fir'aun, and Haman. And it's very strange how Qarun is mentioned before Fir'aun, though the order does not necessarily mean a hierarchy, but he is mentioned before Fir'aun. They rejected Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, and they rejected his call. But let me say here that verse 41, where the name of the chapter is taken from, about the spider. مثل الذين اتخذوا من دون الله أولياء كمثل العنكبوت اتخذت بيتا وإن أوهن البيوت لبيت العنكبوت لو كانوا يعلمون. The parable of those who take protectors other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that of a spider. That's a parable. Is that of a spider spinning a shelter. And the flimsiest of all shelters is certainly that of a spider, if only they knew. Think about the beginning of this verse. This parable is about those who take protectors other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think this is allies with that ultimately to unjust behavior, whether against Muslims or non-Muslims. Their similitude is like the spider's web, which is the spider's home. Inshallah, this is enough for this particular session. We'll continue with the rest of the verses and the selection that Imam Al-Ghazali did. Until the next session, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.